Emergency alarm shattered the silence at 7:43 p.m. on November 15, 2009, sending auction house security into chaos. A parking attendant in a tailored navy suit walked calmly against the fleeing crowd, leather briefcase gripped tight in his hand. Panicked bidders in $1,000 suits scrambled toward exits, while emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. The man moved with practiced precision through the confusion, slipping past distracted guards toward the VIP entrance. He climbed into a rented Lincoln Town car and disappeared into Manhattan traffic, $7 million in rare gold coins secured in his briefcase. The security cameras captured every second in grainy black and white footage, but they would never identify the invisible man who had been planning this perfect crime for 18 months. The financial crisis of 2008 had changed everything on Wall Street, but nothing had changed for Derek Thompson. He still unlocked the same attendant booth outside the Tribeca Tower parking garage every morning at 6 a.m. He still wore the same Navy uniform with the name tag that read D. Thompson. The only difference was that some of his wealthy clients now drove last year's Mercedes instead of this year's Bentley. At 34, Derek had worked construction during the boom years, watching Manhattan transform into a playground for the ultra-rich. When the construction jobs disappeared in 2007, he took the parking attendant position because it was the only work available. His mother, Eleanor Thompson, lived in a Medicaid nursing home in Queens called Sunset Manor, her Alzheimer's worsening each month while the facility demanded $3,000 monthly that Derek barely earned working 60 hours per week. He rented a studio apartment for $1,400 on Northern Boulevard in Astoria and took the subway to work while his clients spent more on lunch than he earned in a week. Derek had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in the South Bronx, the son of Robert Thompson, a postal worker who delivered mail for 32 years, and Eleanor Thompson, who cleaned offices in Manhattan office buildings for 28 years. His parents worked double shifts and saved every penny to send him to Queens Community College, where he studied business administration for 2 years before dropping out when his father died of a massive heart attack at age 59. The medical bills from Robert's 3-week stay in intensive care consumed the family's life savings and forced Eleanor to take a third cleaning job at a hospital in Brooklyn. The wealthy still came to their offices every day, even as their firms collapsed around them. They still needed someone to park their cars, carry their briefcases, remain invisible while they conducted their business. Derek watched them adapt to the crisis with remarkable speed. Firms that had gambled away billions in mortgage securities simply rebranded themselves and found new ways to extract wealth from the struggling economy. Richard Winston embodied this adaptability. His investment bank, Winston Capital Management, had lost $4 billion in subprime mortgages, but Winston had restructured the debt, fired 800 employees including secretaries and janitors who had worked there for decades, and emerged richer than before. He drove the same Rolls-Royce Phantom to work every day, talking loudly on his phone about distressed asset purchases and government bailout opportunities. Winston lived in a $12 million penthouse on Park Avenue that occupied the entire 38th floor, owned a $10 million house in East Hampton with 8 bedrooms and a private beach, maintained a ski chalet in Aspen worth $6 million, and kept offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg with combined balances exceeding $60 million. He had made his fortune by creating complex financial instruments called collateralized pension obligations that transferred risk from wealthy investors to pension funds and ordinary savers. When those instruments failed during the crisis, Winston's clients were protected while teachers and firefighters lost their retirement savings. The first humiliation happened on a Tuesday in March 2008, 3 weeks after Bear Stearns collapsed in a cascade of failed mortgage bets. Winston pulled up at 8:47 a.m., screaming at someone on his Motorola flip phone about mortgage derivatives and credit default swaps. He tossed his car keys toward Derek without looking, without pausing his conversation, without acknowledging that another human being was standing 3 feet away. The keys hit the wet pavement and slid toward a storm drain. Winston continued his phone conversation while Derek scrambled to retrieve the keys before they disappeared into the sewer. The keys were attached to a solid gold keychain worth more than Derek earned in a month. When Derek stood up with mud on his knees and hands, Winston was still talking. He gestured impatiently toward the parking garage entrance, then walked away still shouting into his phone about how the crisis was creating unprecedented profit opportunities for smart investors who understood how to exploit market dislocations. That evening, Winston retrieved his car and handed Derek a $5 bill without making eye contact, without saying thank you, without any acknowledgement that Derek had spent 10 hours in the rain directing traffic and managing the chaos of Manhattan's financial district during one of the worst days in market history. The gesture felt deliberate, calculated to remind Derek of his place in the social hierarchy. Winston had just closed a deal to buy distressed mortgages from homeowners facing foreclosure. The profit margin was 3,000%. Families were losing their homes so that Winston could buy another yacht. That night, Derek walked through Winston's car with a flashlight, searching for anything valuable he could steal to help pay for his mother's care. Instead, he found something more interesting. Bank statements in the glove compartment showed multiple offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, with balances totaling $47 million. Credit card receipts revealed payments to escort services and illegal gambling operations. Most importantly, Winston had left his garage door opener clipped to the visor, programmed for 1247 Park Avenue, apartment 12A. Derek photographed everything with his Nokia camera phone. The images were blurry but readable. For the first time since taking the parking job, he felt like he had discovered something valuable. Not money, but leverage. Information that could be used against the man who treated him like furniture. Over the following months, Derek studied Winston with the intensity of a graduate student preparing for comprehensive exams. The financial crisis had made Winston careless, desperate to close deals quickly before the market collapsed further. He discussed illegal activities openly in his car, assuming that parking attendants were too stupid or too scared to understand what they were hearing. Winston specialized in a particular type of fraud that had become epidemic during the crisis. He would identify pension funds or municipal governments that were facing budget shortfalls due to declining tax revenues and increased unemployment benefits, then offer them complex investment products that promised high returns with low risk. These products were actually sophisticated scams designed to transfer money from public funds to Winston's private accounts through a maze of fees, commissions, and hidden charges. The victims were always the same: teachers, firefighters, police officers, and municipal workers whose retirement savings were being systematically looted by financial predators like Winston. When the investments inevitably failed because they were designed to fail, Winston would blame market conditions and regulatory changes while keeping the fees and commissions for himself. The pension fund managers who had trusted him would be fired, the municipal treasurers would be prosecuted for negligence, and the workers would discover that their retirement accounts had been emptied. Derek learned all of this by listening to Winston's phone conversations during the daily commute to and from the garage. Winston treated his Rolls-Royce like a mobile office, conducting business calls and strategy sessions, while Derek parked the car and retrieved it each evening. Winston never considered that the parking attendant might be listening, understanding, and remembering every detail of his criminal enterprises. Winston's casual cruelty toward Derek became more pronounced as the financial crisis deepened and his profits increased. He would throw keys at Derek's feet every morning and complain loudly when retrieval took more than 30 seconds. He made jokes about Derek's appearance to other clients, calling him the Invisible Man, and laughing about how parking attendants were probably too stupid to understand English or too poor to matter. He once tipped Derek a penny and told him to buy something nice for himself, then laughed uproariously at his own wit. But what truly enraged Derek was not the personal humiliation, though that cut deep enough. It was listening to Winston discuss his victims with obvious pleasure, with the satisfaction of a predator who enjoyed the hunt as much as the kill. Winston would laugh about pension fund managers who trusted his investment advice, joke about municipal treasurers who were too naive to understand the risks, boast about how much money he had extracted from public employee retirement systems in cities across America. Winston treated the destruction of ordinary people's lives as a game, a source of entertainment and profit. He had no empathy for the families whose futures he was destroying, no concern for the retirees who would work until they died because their pensions had been looted, no awareness that his victims were human beings with hopes and fears and children who depended on them. He saw other people as resources to be exploited, obstacles to be overcome, or furniture to be ignored. Derek began to understand that Winston represented everything wrong with American capitalism in its purest, most concentrated form. He was a predator who had built his wealth by destroying the economic security of working families. He lived in luxury while his victims struggled to pay for food and medical care. He treated service workers like disposable objects while stealing from their retirement funds. He embodied the casual evil of a system that rewarded sociopathy and punished decency. During the summer of 2008, Derek started keeping detailed notes about Winston's criminal activities. He recorded phone conversations using a small digital recorder hidden in his uniform pocket. He photographed documents left in the car. He memorized names, dates, account numbers, and transaction details. He was building a comprehensive dossier on Winston's pension fund frauds, not because he planned to turn it over to authorities, but because he understood that knowledge was power, and power was the only thing that mattered in Winston's world. The collapse of Lehman Brothers in September 2008 created chaos throughout the financial system. Banks were failing, investment firms were merging or disappearing, and federal regulators were overwhelmed trying to prevent a complete economic meltdown. In this environment, normal oversight and security procedures were often suspended or ignored. Law enforcement agencies were focused on preventing systemic collapse rather than investigating individual crimes. Derek realized that the crisis had created a unique opportunity. Federal investigators were dealing with frauds involving hundreds of billions of dollars. Regulatory agencies were trying to prevent the complete destruction of the American financial system. Nobody was paying attention to smaller crimes, especially those committed by people who were supposed to be invisible. He began planning his operation in October 2008, starting with a detailed study of Winston's financial activities and personal habits. Derek had observed that Winston often left his car unlocked while conducting business in nearby restaurants and private clubs. During these times, Derek would enter the vehicle and photograph any documents he found. Over several weeks, he accumulated Winston's social security number, birth date, mother's maiden name, and detailed information about his offshore accounts. More importantly, he learned about Winston's collecting habits and personal obsessions. Winston was passionate about rare gold coins, particularly American double eagles minted before 1933, when the United States abandoned the gold standard. He owned several $1 million worth of these coins and regularly attended private auctions to acquire new pieces for his collection. Derek discovered that Winston was planning to attend a specialized auction at Sotheby's, featuring the coin collection of Harrison Blackwell, a railroad tycoon who had died in 1929 during the stock market crash. The collection included some of the rarest American gold coins ever minted, pieces that had been locked away in Blackwell's private vault for 80 years. The estimated total value was $12 million, making it one of the most significant numismatic auctions in decades. Winston intended to bid on several specific pieces, with a budget of approximately $2 million from a special account he maintained in Switzerland, specifically for collectibles purchases. He had been planning this acquisition for months, studying catalog descriptions and condition reports with the obsessive attention he normally reserved for financial frauds. The auction was scheduled for November 15, 2009, more than a year away, which gave Derek plenty of time to prepare. Unlike typical art auctions, this sale would involve fewer than 40 serious collectors from around the world. The coins would be displayed in portable cases that could be easily transported, and the security would be sophisticated but not overwhelming. Most importantly, the auction represented something personally meaningful to Winston, an opportunity to acquire trophies that would symbolize his triumph over the financial crisis. Derek realized that this auction represented the perfect opportunity for his operation. The target was specific, high value, and personally important to Winston. The security would be manageable with proper planning. Most importantly, the crime would force Winston to experience the same powerlessness that ordinary people felt when wealthy predators destroyed their lives. Sotheby's in 2009 used security technology that was advanced for its time, but relied heavily on human procedures rather than automated systems. The building had analog surveillance cameras that recorded to magnetic tape, motion sensors connected to traditional telephone lines, and a fire suppression system controlled by mechanical switches in the basement. These systems were reliable but not integrated, creating potential vulnerabilities for someone who understood how they operated. Derek spent 6 months studying these systems during public tours and educational events. He posed as a graduate student in art history at Columbia University, writing his thesis on auction house procedures and security protocols. He attended lectures, participated in behind-the-scenes tours, and asked detailed questions about emergency procedures and safety systems. The staff was happy to discuss their operations with an interested academic who seemed to appreciate the complexity and importance of their work. He learned that successful bidders at coin auctions were required to complete their purchases immediately after each lot was sold. Payment could be made by cash, wire transfer, or certified bank check, but all transactions had to be finalized before the purchased items could leave the building. The coins were stored in a secure vault in the basement until payment was verified and transportation arrangements were finalized by the new owners. The building's fire suppression system was designed to protect valuable artwork and collectibles from smoke and water damage. If activated, it would trigger evacuation alarms throughout the building and temporarily disable electronic security systems to allow emergency personnel to enter quickly and safely. The system could be activated manually from control panels in the basement, but only by authorized personnel with proper access codes. Derek obtained these access codes by befriending Frank Morrison, a 62-year-old security supervisor who had worked at Sotheby's for 15 years and took obvious pride in the building's perfect safety record. Morrison was a former police officer who had retired from the NYPD after 20 years of service and genuinely enjoyed his work protecting valuable cultural artifacts. He was lonely, recently divorced, and eager to discuss his expertise with anyone who showed genuine interest. Over several conversations disguised as casual academic interviews, Morrison inadvertently revealed the fire suppression codes, guard rotation schedules, locations of surveillance equipment, and detailed procedures for handling emergency evacuations. He explained the specific protocols used for coin auctions, which differed from typical art sales due to the portable nature of the merchandise and the specialized security requirements for precious metals. Morrison also provided Derek with detailed floor plans of the building, including areas not normally accessible to the public. He explained how the vault systems worked, where the most valuable items were stored, and what procedures were followed when lots were transferred between the auction room and secure storage areas. Morrison trusted Derek completely because he appeared to be a serious academic conducting legitimate research. 3 weeks before the auction, Derek used Winston's personal information to establish himself as a serious collector through a shell company called Heritage Numismatics, LLC. He filed incorporation papers in Delaware, established a business address using a mail forwarding service, and created a professional website featuring information about rare coin investments and numismatic consulting services. He provided Winston's financial statements and credit history as proof of his ability to make high-value purchases. The documentation showed millions of dollars in assets, perfect credit scores, and a long history of successful investment activities. Sotheby's was impressed by Winston's apparent wealth and reputation in the collecting community, and they were eager to establish a relationship with such a qualified new client. Derek received an invitation to preview the Blackwell collection during a special event for qualified bidders. He attended the preview wearing a tailored suit purchased with cash and carrying business cards identifying him as a numismatic consultant with expertise in American gold coins. He studied every aspect of the auction room layout, the storage procedures, and the staff protocols. He introduced himself to key personnel as Winston's representative, explaining that Mr. Winston was traveling in Europe on business, but had authorized Heritage Numismatics to bid on his behalf for specific lots in the upcoming sale. The story was believable because Winston did travel frequently for business, and it was common for serious collectors to use professional representatives at major auctions. The Sotheby's staff treated him with the professional courtesy and deference reserved for serious collectors with substantial financial resources. They provided detailed information about each coin lot, including provenance documentation, condition reports, and estimated values. They assured him that Heritage Numismatics would receive priority consideration if bidding became competitive for the most desirable pieces. During the preview, Derek carefully observed the security procedures used for handling the coins. He noted how the staff moved items between the display area and the secure storage vault, what protocols were followed for documentation and authentication, and how the building's various security systems operated during normal business hours. 1 week before the auction, Derek opened a business checking account for Heritage Numismatics at Chase Manhattan Bank. He deposited $400,000 in cash that he had accumulated through careful savings over 2 years and small-scale credit card frauds using Winston's identity. The money represented his entire life savings, plus funds obtained through minor fraudulent activities that were too small to attract attention from law enforcement. The banking procedures in 2009 were still relatively lenient for cash deposits under $500,000, especially for established business entities with proper documentation. Derek presented legitimate identification, business incorporation documents, and credible explanations for the source of his funds. He explained that Heritage Numismatics dealt primarily in cash transactions because many coin collectors preferred anonymous purchases for tax and privacy reasons. The bank was eager to attract new business during the financial crisis and did not conduct extensive background investigations for deposits of this size. The account was approved immediately, and Derek received checkbooks, wire transfer capabilities, and a business credit card that would provide additional credibility during the auction. For 3 months before the auction, Derek conducted detailed surveillance of Sotheby's operations and security procedures. He visited the building regularly during different times of day and week, observing patterns in staff behavior, guard rotations, and visitor traffic. He attended other auctions and cultural events to understand how the building operated under various conditions. He learned that Tuesday evenings were particularly quiet because most major auctions were held on weekends or during weekday afternoons when wealthy collectors were available. The security staff was smaller on Tuesday evenings, and the building's operations were more relaxed because fewer high-value items were typically on display. Derek also studied the personal habits and schedules of key Sotheby's personnel. He learned that Frank Morrison typically worked the evening shift on Tuesdays and took his dinner break at exactly 7:30 p.m. The other security guards followed predictable routines that could be anticipated and exploited with proper timing. Most importantly, he discovered that the building's fire suppression system was tested monthly on the second Tuesday of each month. The tests were conducted during evening hours to minimize disruption to normal business operations, and the staff was thoroughly familiar with evacuation procedures because they practiced them regularly. During this surveillance period, Derek also monitored Winston's activities and confirmed that the banker would definitely attend the auction. Winston had arranged to fly back from a business trip to London specifically for the sale, and he had transferred $2 million to his Swiss account to ensure adequate bidding funds. He was particularly interested in acquiring a complete set of 1933 double eagles that represented the highlight of the Blackwell collection. November 15, 2009. Derek arrived at Sotheby's at 6 p.m. in a rented Lincoln Town car that he had reserved using the Heritage Numismatics business credit card. He had decided against driving Winston's Rolls-Royce to the auction because it would create unnecessary risk and potential evidence linking him to the crime. The rental car provided anonymity and could be easily abandoned if necessary. He wore a navy Armani suit purchased with cash from a men's clothing store in Midtown Manhattan, carried a leather briefcase containing wire transfer authorizations and business documentation, and projected the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on collectibles. His appearance and demeanor were indistinguishable from the other serious collectors attending the sale. The auction room was smaller and more intimate than typical Sotheby's sales, with approximately 40 collectors, dealers, and specialists in attendance. Many of them knew each other from previous auctions and numismatic conventions. They represented museums, private collectors, and investment funds that specialized in rare coins and precious metals. Derek sat in seat 15, registered under the name Heritage Numismatics LLC. He had arrived early to ensure optimal positioning in the room and to observe the other participants as they arrived. He bid conservatively on several early lots to establish his credibility as a knowledgeable participant and serious collector. The auction began at 6:30 p.m. with lower value lots that were designed to warm up the bidding and establish the market atmosphere. Derek watched the other bidders carefully, noting their strategies, their price limits, and their areas of particular interest. He could identify the serious collectors, the professional dealers, and the casual participants who were present more for entertainment than acquisition. The evening's most valuable lots were scheduled for the final hour of the sale, beginning at approximately 7:30 p.m. These included several 1933 double eagles worth approximately $1 million each, a complete set of 1804 silver dollars worth $2.1 million, and a unique 1849 double eagle that had been specially minted for the Smithsonian Institution and somehow acquired by Harrison Blackwell during the 1920s. At 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the premium lots were scheduled for bidding, Derek excused himself to use the restroom. Instead, he took the service elevator to the basement level, where the fire suppression controls were located. The basement was empty except for mechanical equipment and storage areas for artwork not currently on display. Derek located the fire suppression control panel exactly where Frank Morrison had described it during their conversations. The panel was housed in a locked metal cabinet, but Derek had obtained a duplicate key weeks earlier by borrowing Morrison's keyring during one of their meetings and having copies made at a hardware store in Queens. He entered the access code Morrison had inadvertently provided and programmed a 15-minute delay before activation. This would give him enough time to return to the auction room, establish his presence among the other bidders, and position himself for the evacuation that would begin when the alarm sounded. He returned to seat 15 at 7:25 p.m., just as the auctioneer was beginning the presentation of the premium lots. The 1933 double eagles were displayed in individual protective cases under specialized lighting that made the gold surfaces gleam like liquid fire. These coins represented the pinnacle of American numismatic art and were among the most valuable collectibles in the world. Derek bid aggressively on the first 1933 double eagle, driving the price to $850,000 before withdrawing to allow another collector to win. This established him as a serious bidder with substantial financial resources and demonstrated his knowledge of coin values and market conditions. He repeated this pattern for several subsequent lots, always bidding intelligently but never winning. At exactly 7:40 p.m., as bidding was beginning on the unique 1849 double eagle that was expected to sell for more than $2 million, the fire suppression system activated throughout the building. The evacuation proceeded exactly as Sotheby's had practiced in dozens of emergency drills over the years. Fire alarms sounded throughout the building, emergency lighting activated automatically, and staff members began directing everyone toward the main exits according to predetermined procedures. The entire building would be cleared within 6 minutes, leaving only emergency personnel to deal with the supposed fire. In the confusion of the evacuation, Derek moved against the crowd toward the secure storage area where the premium coin lots were being held for post-sale processing. The auction had been suspended immediately when the alarm sounded, but the lots that had already been sold during the evening were secured in the vault, pending payment verification and collection by their new owners. The route to the storage area required him to pass through several corridors that were normally restricted to staff members, but the emergency evacuation procedures had opened all doors to facilitate rapid exit from the building. Security guards were focused on ensuring that all participants and staff members reached safety, not on protecting items that were already secured in the vault. The storage vault contained 5 major coin lots from the evening sale that had been purchased by successful bidders before the evacuation began. These included 3 1933 double eagles worth $2.8 million total, 2 sets of 1804 silver dollars worth $2.1 million total, and the unique 1849 double eagle worth $2.1 million. The combined value was exactly $7 million. These coins represented some of the rarest and most historically significant numismatic specimens in private hands. The 1933 double eagles were among fewer than 20 examples known to exist, and each one was worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The 1804 silver dollars were legendary among collectors because they had actually been minted in 1834 for diplomatic gifts, making them among the most famous coins in American history. The vault was protected by electronic locks that had been automatically disabled by the fire emergency protocols to allow evacuation personnel access if it became necessary to move valuable items to safety. This was a standard procedure designed to prevent valuable artwork and collectibles from being trapped in areas that might become inaccessible during an emergency. Derek carried a small electronic device capable of bypassing the remaining mechanical security systems that protected the individual storage cases. The technology had cost him $40,000, purchased through black market dealers in Eastern Europe, using funds obtained through his various preparatory schemes. The device was about the size of a smartphone and could defeat most lock systems manufactured before 2005. The vault opened within 20 seconds of Derek entering the correct sequence on the electronic device. The coin lots were stored in individual protective cases designed for easy transport and handling. Each case was clearly labeled with lot numbers and purchase information, making it simple to identify the most valuable items. Derek transferred all 5 premium lots to his briefcase, along with their authentication certificates and ownership documents. The coins were surprisingly heavy, nearly 15 pounds of pure gold, but the briefcase was specially designed to handle the weight without appearing unusual or suspicious. He also took detailed photographs of the vault's interior with a small digital camera, documenting exactly how the storage area was organized and what other valuable items were present. This information might be useful for future operations or could be sold to other criminals interested in targeting Sotheby's. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. Derek left the vault exactly as he had found it, closing the doors and resetting the electronic systems so that his intrusion would not be immediately obvious to security personnel responding to the fire alarm. He walked calmly to the service exit where confused staff members were still directing people toward primary evacuation routes. A security supervisor was conducting a head count to ensure that all registered bidders and staff members were safely accounted for and evacuated from the building according to emergency procedures. The supervisor recognized Derek as a registered bidder who had been active during the evening's sale. Here was a serious collector who was obviously concerned about the safety of the valuable coins being auctioned and wanted to ensure that emergency personnel could respond effectively to whatever crisis had triggered the alarm system. The supervisor waved him through without examining his briefcase or asking detailed questions about his activities in the building. The man was focused on completing the evacuation procedures and ensuring that emergency responders had clear access to the building, not on investigating individual participants who were cooperating with safety protocols. Derek reached his rented Lincoln Town car at 7:46 p.m. He placed the briefcase in the trunk and drove away slowly, like any concerned citizen, making room for the fire trucks and emergency vehicles that were beginning to arrive in response to the alarm. The New York Fire Department arrived at 7:49 p.m. and conducted a thorough search of the building. They found no evidence of fire, smoke, or any other emergency condition anywhere in the structure. Their investigation concluded that the suppression system had malfunctioned due to corroded wiring in the basement control panel, a problem that was not uncommon in older buildings with aging electrical systems. By 8:30 p.m., Derek had returned the rental car to the Hertz location at LaGuardia Airport. He took a taxi to his studio apartment in Queens, carrying a briefcase containing $7 million worth of the rarest gold coins in American numismatic history. The fire department investigation concluded that the suppression system had malfunctioned due to equipment failure, and no criminal activity was suspected. The building was cleared for normal operations, and Sotheby's planned to resume the auction the following evening. Sotheby's staff discovered the missing coins the following morning during their routine post-auction inventory procedures. The initial assumption was that the lots had been moved to an alternate location during the fire evacuation as part of the emergency protocols, but extensive searches throughout the building found no trace of the missing items. The discovery triggered immediate crisis management procedures. Sotheby's senior management was notified, insurance companies were contacted, and law enforcement agencies were called to investigate what appeared to be a sophisticated theft during a major auction. The company's reputation for security and reliability was at stake. The security cameras had recorded everything, but the analog tape quality was poor, and the lighting conditions during the evacuation made identification extremely difficult. The footage showed a man in a dark suit entering the storage vault at 7:44 p.m. and emerging 90 seconds later with a briefcase, but the emergency lighting created shadows that obscured distinguishing features. The man's height, build, and general appearance could have matched dozens of the auction participants. The camera angles were not optimal for facial recognition, and the poor tape quality made detailed analysis impossible. The investigators had clear evidence that a theft had occurred, but no reliable way to identify the perpetrator from the available footage. FBI Special Agent Patricia Walsh and Agent David Kim were assigned to the case due to the high value of the stolen items and the interstate nature of the numismatic market. They had worked art and collectibles crimes for a combined 25 years and understood the specialized world of rare coin collecting and the criminal networks that sometimes targeted high-value auctions. The agents began by interviewing all registered bidders who had attended the auction. Each participant was required to provide detailed information about their activities during the evacuation, their whereabouts when the alarm sounded, and their knowledge of the building's layout and security procedures. The process took several days because many of the collectors had traveled from other states or countries to attend the sale. Derek was interviewed on November 18th at the FBI's Manhattan field office. He presented himself as a legitimate numismatic consultant representing Heritage Numismatics LLC, provided business cards and incorporation documents, and answered all questions in a straightforward, professional manner that impressed the investigating agents. When asked about his activities during the evacuation, Derek explained that he had followed the staff's directions and exited through the service entrance to avoid crowding the main exits, where elderly collectors might have difficulty moving. Quickly, he expressed concern about the security of the valuable coins and disappointment that the auction had been suspended before he could bid on the 1849 double eagle that his client had specifically wanted to acquire. The agents found nothing suspicious in Derek's responses or documentation. Heritage Numismatics appeared to be a legitimate business with proper banking relationships and credible references in the numismatic community. Derek's knowledge of rare coins was extensive, and his professional demeanor was consistent with other dealers and collectors they had interviewed during the investigation. The FBI investigation continued for 8 months, without identifying any viable suspects or developing significant leads. The agents interviewed coin dealers throughout North America, monitored numismatic auction houses for suspicious sales, and worked with international law enforcement agencies to track potential smuggling operations that might be attempting to move. The stolen coins. The stolen coins were too rare and recognizable to be sold through normal channels without immediate detection. Any attempt to auction them publicly would immediately alert law enforcement and the numismatic community, which maintained detailed databases of stolen items and monitored major sales for suspicious activity. The thieves would need to find private collectors willing to purchase stolen merchandise and keep the transactions secret, or arrange for the coins to be melted down for their gold content, which would destroy their numismatic value but provide anonymous liquidity through precious metals dealers. Sotheby's hired private security consultants from Kroll Associates to review their procedures and identify vulnerabilities that had allowed the theft to occur. The consultants concluded that the crime had been executed by someone with detailed knowledge of the building's layout, security systems, and emergency procedures. However, all Sotheby's employees had been thoroughly investigated and cleared of suspicion. The insurance investigation conducted by Lloyd's of London reached similar conclusions. The company had insured the coins for their full auction value under a comprehensive policy that covered theft during properly conducted sales. Lloyd's paid Sotheby's $7 million in compensation and assigned their own investigators to attempt recovery of the stolen items. Private investigators hired by the insurance company focused on potential connections between the theft and organized crime groups known to specialize in high-value collectibles. They found no evidence linking the Sotheby's theft to any known criminal organizations or established fencing operations that dealt in stolen artwork and collectibles. The coins effectively vanished from the legitimate numismatic market. None of the stolen pieces appeared in subsequent auctions, dealer catalogs, or museum acquisitions over the following months and years. The FBI maintained an active investigation for 2 years before classifying the case as unsolved but ongoing, with periodic reviews when new information became available. The numismatic community mourned the loss of several historically significant pieces, including the unique 1849 double eagle that had been the centerpiece of the Blackwell collection. The coin's destruction represented an irreplaceable loss to American cultural heritage.